Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down. Very excited for our guest. But first, I'm going to pass it over to our co-host, talk a little bit about our guest. So over to you, Kari.
Thank you so much. We have a history-making guest today, a member of Phildelphia City Council, the first non-Democrat or Republican to get elected to Phildelphia City Council, I believe, ever. In the history of Phildelphia City Council, or at least in a long, long time, long before modern politics. And we are just so delighted to be joined by our guest today. So welcome to our guest. Please introduce yourself, the history-making member of Phildelphia City Council.
Thank you so much, Kari. I am Kendra Brooks. I am City Council member at large for the City of Philadelphia under the Working Families Party. I've been in office 2.5, almost 3 years now.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit, before we get into what's happening now, tell us a little bit about Councilwoman Brooks, about your historic run. What motivated you to run? What gave you the confidence to run, from a position that no one had ever run from and been successful in the history of Philadelphia politics? What made you confident to run under the Working Families Party banner and not, run as a Democrat or, run as a Republican, which would have been the traditional route? First, what made you motivated to run in general? And then what made you believe that you could make history the way you did?
Well, what motivated me to run basically was life. Life presents you situation, being an impacted, Black working class mom in Philadelphia, deeply grounded in social movements, whether it was around education, criminal justice reform, gun violence, all of those things put me in a position that I should be running for public office. Never thought I would want to do that, but it was based on the social movements. I realized that the work I had been doing needed a seat at the table, and a seat at the table should be given to someone who's impacted, a working class Black woman that's unapologetic. I don't come out of political movements. I come out of social movements. So like all of my experiences, whether it was the underfunded schools, the gun violence in my community, housing insecurity, unable to find a good job, those are the people we should have in office, because those lived experience are the things that guide the legislation that I want to do. And for me, Working Families Party allowed me the opportunity to run as my authentic self. Like all the reasons why people count you out from running were all the reasons they told me I should.
And so, like Kari was saying, you are like the first third party candidate. So a lot of people are very excited and inspired by your race. Can you just talk a little bit about what is life like as a council person? Like, what are some of your duties, and what are some of the things you're excited to do in your day to day?
So we have long days. I think most people don't realize this is like 24/7, 365. You're always helping your constituents, whether I'm out to dinner with my husband, picking up my children from school, hanging out for a girls' night. Someone is always going to stop you about an issue or need to follow up. So the work doesn't stop. I think, and what is the work is the question. So we do a lot of work around creating legislation to help, keep people secure in their houses, around a lot of trash complaints and things like that. But we also, work with social movements to make sure the issues that people are talking about on the grounds are being moved forward. coupled with constituent services. You know, a lot of phone calls about trees out, lights out, alley cleanings. But I think the most of our work we spend in a lot of meetings with, you know, everyone. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I meet with everyone. I meet with business leaders. I meet with community people. I meet with small business owners. If someone wants a meeting, I try to, you know, meet with as many people as possible, because good legislation is passed when you know every side of the story. And the problem, I feel that why, you know, Black, brown, poor communities have been kind of left out is because a lot of times no one meets with them. So I meet with them mostly, and then I add on the other folks because they're getting meetings across the board, you know, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's small business, like small business association, large landlord tenant groups. They're going to get the meeting with anybody in council. But what about, you know, people that I can meet? You guys are from Pittsburgh in the north side that can gather up a group of folks to have a conversation with just because. A lot of times those folks don't get a chance to talk to their politicians. And I just wanted to be different. So I spend a lot of time in meetings. I'm in meetings like 5 a day is a good day. On top of all the other things I just listed, we get done.
Yeah, you raise a very important point. You know, not only are you meeting, with the folks that aren't writing the campaign checks, that aren't, on the host committees during campaign season, and like you said, the usual suspects. You also get around the state. You know what I mean? Like you said, we might, when she said the north side, she's not talking about North Philly, but she's talking about the north side of Pittsburgh. She might be at Young Brothers, somewhere like that. Why do you think it's so important to not only, make the rounds in Philadelphia, but get out of Philadelphia into other places in the state like Pittsburgh? Because occasionally I'll see, Isaiah Thomas made it out, for Netroots. Joanna McClinton, from the state house, makes it out because she's the minority leader. Why do you think it's important for you to be so active in not only Philadelphia politics, but getting around the state and building relationships with like-minded people, even in the southwestern corner?
Because, those relationships is how we build power. Keep in mind, I come from being a community organizer, right? So coming into this work as a minority, I'm the only person elected in my party. It's important that I build allies across the state around issues that are not just impacting us here in Philadelphia as being the city of the first class, right? I'm talking about issues that are affecting people in rural areas and even, far on the other side. And I think that when we come together, that's how we win. So, housing and gentrification is happening in Pittsburgh too. Like housing issues occur there. So we should be talking to elected officials in Pittsburgh about that too. Workforce development, jobs, gun violence, crime, all these addictions, all these things are real across the state. So I think it's important that I build allies, especially being of a minority party. How can we get more people that believe what we believe in? That, housing is a human right. People deserve quality childcare, to have these conversations collectively, because a win in Philadelphia can potentially also be a win in Pittsburgh. We have so many mirroring legislations based on, relationships that I've built across the state, whether it's in York or Erie, all of those places, they all matter. And collectively, we can build the power to make changes at the state level, even when it's held by another party that we may not agree with.
And so you talk about one. So what has been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face since taking office? Because like you said, it is just you, but you're building allies, and you're having to travel, and there are pressing issues. You also got elected like right before COVID, and so that was this unprecedented learning curve. So what has been some of your biggest challenges since taking office?
The biggest challenge was the pandemic, but I think for me, the fact that I already had existing relationships, I could kind of reach out to folks, whether it was across the state or across the aisle, to kind of move some things along, because the pandemic, it caused our work to shift. And whatever that meant, because I was only in office 3 months before it shifted. So keep in mind, I was still learning. So we only understood pandemic council because we've never had anything else. But one thing that stood out the most to me, being an activist, an organizer, all the things they told me that wasn't possible when I was organizing, all of a sudden became possible. So even though it was a challenge, it also was a clear victory, and a clear path forward that we can pause utility bills and the world is not going to shut down, right? We can stop evictions and life will still go on. You know, every child could have a laptop and internet, you know, and it's not going to crash the funds of the school district. And we can't have access to free medical care. And all these things I have been fighting for years that people said I was crazy, like this is ridiculous. All of a sudden it became possible, you know. And I think although it was a challenge, it also shifted the narrative to let people know that all the things that we think that we should have as citizens here in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, that they say we can't, it's possible. We just have to push people to do it. And I think right now, the next thing that's pretty challenging right now, we have 4 missing council people on council. I don't know if this has ever happened before. So we have 4 vacant seats, you know, 2.5, almost 3 years into the term. So that's very interesting as that unfolds. And I think I was just elected at a time that everything is different. There's no playbook for all the things that are happening. And like I said, I look at it as a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because we get to see what's possible, whether it's, you know, all the things that became possible during the pandemic, and then all the things that, you know, we can see our government in action, even though we're down 4 council members here in Philadelphia.
And you just talked about those council vacancies. Now, is that directly related to next year's mayor's race and the resign to run rule that they have in Philadelphia, where if you're a member of council, if you want to run for mayor, you have to resign before you formally announce your intentions to seek the office of mayor?
Yes, exactly. So we have 4 members that are mayoral hopefuls that resigned at the beginning of our session.
Interesting. And so how has those vacancies impacted how council gets its work done?
I mean, I think some delays really in hearings initially because we had to get folks moved to new committees and new committee assignments, and then kind of figuring out the vote count, like how all that works. But I think we're pretty we're sailing along pretty smoothly. We've had a couple of hearings. Things have still been moving along, and you know, I want to applaud my colleagues for just making it happen. Like they figured it out, and we're moving forward until a special election in November to replace those 4 council members.
Okay.
You know, until the end of the term.
And if my math is still right, there's 17 council seats in Philadelphia, so that brings you currently down to 13.
Yes.
Seats.
And we need 12 for a supermajority for anything we pass to be veto proof. So we're like to the wire here. Right.
So how do you see next year's mayoral election? Obviously, you'll be running for re-election as well. You know, what do you think that the major issues are going to be on voters' minds when they go to vote, basically, a year from now?
I think number one is probably going to be gun violence in our city. We have a huge spike in gun violence. I think community safety is going to be a part of that conversation. And I just think economic development and workforce development is going to have to be a part of the conversation coming off the pandemic. We still have a workforce that has not been fully built up, and we need to continue to get people hired because we are listed as the poorest, biggest city, and those factors need to change. As well as housing. Housing has become, it was already an issue prior to me being elected, and it has been exacerbated by, COVID. Now that all the eviction moratoriums are lifted, we have an unprecedented number of folks that are, falling into homelessness, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be something that comes up for our mayoral hopefuls.
You talk about the election, we have an election coming up in November, but Pennsylvania is still in the midst of almost the heartland of election denial. And so as in November, as you're trying to deal with all of these present issues, how are you motivating people to get involved in the electoral process? Because like right now, there's like so much misinformation, disinformation about voting, but there's like so much that can really be changed and improved upon if there's huge turnout in November.
I think like my election and like many others, even though people are fighting us tooth and nail, to silence the vote, disempower black and brown folks, disenfranchise black and brown folks, I think it's important, that every vote matters. And, I'm proof that every single vote matters. I, ran as a third party elected, did something that has never been done before. I'm a mother of 4 daughters, 3 of which are 18 and older, and their friends was like, Miss Nikki, they call me Miss Nikki. We don't believe in voting. That don't mean nothing. It doesn't work for me. I promised them that if I won this election, it's proof that their vote counts. And I always tell this story because I ran into one of them on the subway when I first got elected. And she was so motivated that I got elected, and then she was a part of that process. Then now she is like, our next stop is to get this man out the White House, and which was former President Trump. And I think that the significance of that is that we have to encourage our young people. We have to encourage disenfranchised people, and we can't let these white ring extremists try to destroy our democracy. They're working on it brick by brick, and we can't let them. And we have to show up at the polls, bring friends and families, and prove that our vote and our voice always matters. And I think it's up to us to do that, not just elected officials, but like people on the ground, moms, fathers, uncles, coaches, everyone. It takes all of us to help, folks realize that we can win this.
No, thank you for that. I'm just thinking about, just going back, to November, 2019. I'm sure, throughout that process, you felt, like it was possible, like it was real. I'm sure that's why you embarked on this journey, but at what point, whether it was election night, when did it really set in, that this was really gonna happen, and what was the response from the Philadelphia political community? I've traveled, around Pennsylvania politics for over two decades now. I know Philadelphia politics, pretty well. Went to IUP. Most of my best friends from college, are from Philly, and so I know Philly, pretty well, and I know the establishment has been entrenched in Philadelphia politics, even more so than Pittsburgh politics for many, many years. So what was, when did it set in that you made history? And then what was the response from the traditional political establishment in Philadelphia when they realized that you did make history?
So I think it was before Election Day when I realized that I could win this. When folks that have ignored you through your whole campaign start calling your phone saying we need to have a conversation. That was my first indication. And I think when I started breaking all the records, I think that's when it changed things. First, it was I couldn't raise the money. I raised the money. My team did an excellent job of creating media around my election, because by the time we ran in a general, we didn't run in a primary because, I ran as a third party. So I ran against the Republican Party. So we had to create our own media, and you guys know firsthand how it is to create your own narrative in the media. And we did that. And, I think that was beneficial. And I think for me, when it all kicked in, that I actually won, I think it was like after Election Day, after all the hoopla had went down, and I was like, oh, wow, I really did this. I did something that I didn't think I could do, did it in a way to make history, and set precedent for, folks to come behind me. And it could have been like way after Election Day. I think when I realized the day after Election Day, my phone was like blowing up, like unbelievable. And I realized I had to hire somebody, like literally the day after Election Day, because I could not keep track of the number of phone calls and meetings that were coming in. And I was like, oh, this is real, really quick. And this is before I had a title, before we were sworn in, before I had to hire up staff, just trying to figure out how to make it happen. And it was definitely an amazing feeling as a mother of 4, just being an example for my children was like amazing, but even more so being an example for young women with a story like mine. Teenage mom, worked my way through college, did nursing assistant work to work my way through college. Life wasn't easy. None of this came easy. And then to end up the first of anything, but the first third-party elected official in the state in years. I think 70 to 100 years. That's a long time, and that's huge history. And that's why I keep my ancestors with me on my walls, because the women that came before that did, remarkable things against all odds, I feel like I always got to have them in the background, giving me the energy to keep pushing forward.
What the energy to keep pushing forward? You recently were you are a part of a coalition that has been responding to the call for impeachment for DA Krasner. You spoke very, passionately at that rally. What has motivated you to get involved in this fight? And for a lot of folks, how has your involvement really motivated them that their vote counts?
I mean, this is the epitome of your vote counts, right? The fact that this is not the first time the right wing has tried to come along and, disenfranchise Philadelphia voters. They tried it with the Biden election, where we had this whole count every vote rally at downtown Philadelphia, and our city commissioners were under threats and needed security. And now it's happening again when Krasner was reelected by a 2-1 margin, right? What makes folks from outside of Philadelphia feel that they can come in and kind of disenfranchise our voters? We're talking about, Black working class communities overwhelmingly came to support Larry Krasner as our DA. And just because you don't believe in his values, you want to attempt to steal votes from voters by attacking the person that they elected into this office. And I'm holding true to that, because if we allow this to happen, if we allow folks from across the state that have no dealings in Philadelphia to overturn our election, this sets precedent for what's next. So just because folks that don't live our lives here in Philadelphia don't agree with our DA, they want to remove him from office. There are other folks they could have gladly dealt with that we would have agreed upon being impeached, but they did not want to do that. And I think this right here, this is the time where people should realize that our vote matters, and we need to pay attention to who we're voting for, because we didn't allow them to steal the election in 2020, and we won't allow them to steal the election now. And it's going to take all hands on deck, because this is the second attempt, but it's not the last. They're going to continue to try to disenfranchise voters here in Philadelphia. Eventually in Pittsburgh, we're just first, right? It's once we allow them down this path, they'll continue. We see it with the Roe v. Wade stuff, just a constant attack by, right-wing extremists to take back power that we took years and generations to build. And voting rights is one of those things that it took years and generations to build. And we can't allow them to take it. And that's why I felt I needed to be involved. I couldn't just sit by the sidelines and let that happen. Because guess what? If I let them do it to their own, a white attorney, who's next? I'm definitely not excluded. Why wouldn't I be the next person on the chopping block? Me or any other elected official that does not have their same views and ideology.
Thank you for that, Kendra. My next question was about an issue you raised earlier. This has obviously been a huge issue in the city of Philadelphia, and and a large issue in the city of Pittsburgh as well. Is gun violence. Me and Miracle are in tons of conversations all over the political spectrum about what to do, around the issue of gun violence. For those who, align, directly with, Miracle's views around, abolition, and very progressive reform of the criminal justice system and law enforcement, and how we address this, to conversations we have with folks, with very conservative views that are, harken back to the early 90s, lock them up, tough on crime. And, one of my biggest concerns is, given the societal challenges that we're dealing with and the proliferation of guns and young people and social media and all of the things, poverty that are feeding, this challenge, how do you as a progressive leader fight against efforts to harken back to the early 90s, and a lot of times it's not necessarily from a bad place. It's from a place of exasperation. Sometimes it's a place of anger. When we see, teenagers, innocent teenagers getting shot down, or we see people working with young people at after school centers, getting shot down, how do we as progressives, fight against this kind of knee-jerk tendency to say, well, what we can do is just lock them all up. What we can do, is just throw them away. And, how do you navigate that as a leader? And what can we do to help advocate for more progressive solutions and I think more sustainable solutions, to this crisis that we're dealing with right now?
So, earlier I said I'm an impacted person. So I'm going to say just last night, there was a shooting in my neighborhood where, I have to get up out my bed and do room checks, make sure all my kids in the house, right? Because it wasn't late. It might have been like 10:30, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. So for me as an impacted person, I look at this very differently because I also live in a neighborhood where there's a cop car in every corner. So the folks that are calling for more police on the corners, I'm like, what corner are you on? Because these kids out here shooting, the police cars are out there. So I feel like we have to balance this conversation about community safety and what it means to make real community investments. We need to make these deep investments into communities that are suffering. We have poverty, we have substance abuse, we have housing issues, we have a gun violence epidemic that it's out of control. But we realize that these social safety nets that should be in place aren't, and that's why people are falling through the net. And we realize that policing and prisons, they can't solve it. You said it, to your point, we can't just lock them all away forever. That's not going to work. These people in communities need resources, they need care, they need support. And I think that we need to make sure that we target those supports for these neighborhoods that are struggling, more than just cop cars, but job opportunities, make sure we're funding our schools fully, like after school programs and stuff that kept us off the street when we were kids. That's almost obsolete right now. Our schools, our libraries aren't open on the weekends. They're short staffed. After school programs aren't readily available, especially for young adults. Once you turn 12, that's it for after school programs. If it's not available in high school, we need to make sure we're making those investments. Around mental health and first aid, we need mobile crisis units to, respond to issues around mental health that happen in community in a way that's non-criminalizing folks that have mental health issues. So we need to invest in those things, recreation centers, and those things need to be in the hands of the community, because who better to help folks in the community than those in the community? And it's about empowerment, and we need a all hands on deck approach. And when I think about that, I think about what I do first thing as an elected official. Saturday, I'm having this event in my community, and I was just waiting today for the cold phone call saying I couldn't do it because it was just a shooting. Instead, to the, benefit of my police department, they called and said, what other supports do we need? Because we're going to continue to keep your permit to make this happen. Because what we're doing is bringing job opportunities. We're bringing tribe training programs. We're bringing assistance program, whether it's around LIHEAP, rental programs. How can you keep your home? Water assistance, expungement clinic, right to the neighborhood, so people don't have to come in the center city or figure out where to go. We're bringing it to the corner. And these are the things that we have to do. My vision for public safety is about community investments. And I think, and I'm not the only one, as like you said, as progressive, people try to make it seem like this is a far-fetched idea. But the reality is the lack of these investments and the generations of disinvestment has gotten us to where we are now. When I think about when Governor Corbett came into office and he cut all that money into public education, and it impacted Philadelphia drastically. When I think of the average age of the young people that are involved in this violence that we see in our city, guess what? They add up right with the age where they would have been in high school or in school and needed those supports. And we need to roll back. That's what we need to roll back. We need to roll back and get that money back to make sure our kids have quality education and opportunities to be successful. If not, we're just feeding them less hope and more desperation. And it's up to us to continue to push the narrative and challenge those that don't believe that. Because I think when you have tough conversations with people about policing, we saw what happened with our generation when they just locked up everybody up. They locked up all the fathers, left the kids on the street, and now what? Families were taken apart. We divested in public education, and then we're like, oh, these children are out of control. Well, you took away all their supports. And now it's time for us to reinvest in these communities. And I'm holding true to that. Because when those gunshots ring in my neighborhood, I'm the one who's going outside. Now my husband goes out there to go check and see what's happening and make sure my neighbor's okay. This morning, my staff spent time going through the list of people that we know in that block just to check to make sure that people are okay and have what they need. This is what community is about. And I'm not the only one doing it. There are folks like us around the city, around the state that care about communities. And they really want funding towards, community investments, whether it's schools, parks, recreation, all of these things, programs, mental health, to make our neighborhoods better. And it's more than just adding more cops and building more prisons. We can't do that. We've done that already. And we're still in the same position.
Yeah, and I wanted to continue on the conversation because you said, I'm not sure if they're going to pull my permit. And a lot of people do not understand and do not realize that once the area is considered violent or a safety issue, you really cannot even go and bring services to those areas. And I'm thinking about recently in Philly, the ban on the weapons was thrown out at the courts. Here in Pittsburgh, we had an initiative to pay people, and that was stopped because they said it was a race-based solution. And so when we're out here fighting for solutions, and I know we have to wrap, a lot of the people don't understand that the solutions that we know work, people are actively trying to stop. And so what is it that people can do to help support you or help support these communities and even the people who are perpetuating this violence so that we can really create the communities that we need?
We need people to get involved. Like, I know people are frustrated with the process, and I get it because I get frustrated too. But in order for us to see the change what we want to see, we have to do more than vote. We need to get involved. And I suggest that people join member-based grassroots organizations and advocate for the issues that matter to them. Because that's the only way we win is people power. The status quo is going to continue to move to status quo, but people power, we have the ability to change things.
And I know we, have a few, minutes left. We always love to, give you opportunity. Even folks in Pittsburgh, we're also, going to be, promoting this in Philadelphia as well. How can folks get in touch, with your office, if they need anything? Because I understand you represent the whole city, right? You're a citywide council member, so you're not just one part of Philadelphia. So, how can folks, get in touch with you, learn more about the initiatives that you're spearheading, and particularly if they're in the Philadelphia area, get in touch with Councilwoman Brooks's office? Okay,
so on social media, I am at Kendra with a K, capital K, PHL on Twitter and on TikTok, and Kendra PHL Council on Instagram and Facebook, and phlcouncil.com/Kendra Brooks, or you can just good old fashioned phone call 215-696-0461.
Thank you. And as we wrap, we ask this is our standard question. You talk a lot about the struggles and the challenges of being a council member. But what are some of the things that are bringing you joy, keeping you motivated and inspired to do the work that you do?
I think the one thing that brings me joy always are young people. I think the amazing young people that don't get the recognition and praise as they should, that are overcrowded, by all the negative that we see in communities. Those young people bring me joy because they are the compass for me to where we need to go. They are the direction that I need to stay focused on for the future. And they keep it 100%. Young people gonna tell you when you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And that brings me joy. I love solidarity and accountability, and the young folks always bring it to me every time, including my own. I have a big family, so.
Yes. Well, Councilwoman Kendra Brooks, thank you so very much for taking a little bit out of your day to just talk with us. And before we go, I know you are spearheading the initiative of the Dignity Act. You've been doing a lot. Do you just want to just say something about that just before we wrap? I know we're at time, but I just want to.
Yes, but I want to make sure that folks call their Senate to pass Senate Bill 1419, which is the Dignity in Women's Act, which means that women won't be shackled while they're having childbirth and delivery, that women will have the adequate needs when they're on their cycle, and just making sure women have quality care regardless of them being incarcerated. And I think the reason I thought it was important to pass this resolution today, because there are so many women across the state that are in crisis during pregnancy. And we need to make sure if we want to deliver happy, safe babies, if we want, to continue to bring quality of life, even once you do something wrong, we need to make sure that we're showing care. Then this is just a first step in showing care to women who are incarcerated. So shout out to the Coalition for Women in Dignity Act.
All right, Councilwoman, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, you guys.
Again, that was Councilwoman Kendra Brooks, one of the first third-party candidate to win a major office in the state of Pennsylvania in almost 100 years. Definitely a very inspirational figure and someone on the rise, someone to watch for, not only in Philadelphia, but around the state. So what a great conversation, and really thank you to her and her staff for making that happen.
Yes, and like the Councilwoman said, it's so important that you're registered to vote. Voter registration ends in Pennsylvania October 24th, but it's more important that you also get involved. And there's so many issues going on. There's an opportunity for you to do something and make a difference in somebody's life. So I hope, I even felt like inspired and motivated to go out and do more just listening to the Councilwoman. So I hope you were inspired and motivated as well. Please make sure, you're following, liking, subscribing to Wanted Power. We have a lot of great things coming for you and a lot of information that you're trying to share. So make sure you stay tuned. And with that, I hope you have a great evening. We'll see you next week for the Sunday Night SitDown.
Take care.